Hi, this is Brennan Davis from Bedrock Games, the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Joel Clark for another episode of Wuxia Workshop, and we're going to be talking about The Battle Wizard, a 1977 film directed by Bao Shu Li, starring Danny Lee and Tanny Tien. It's kind of a gonzo, extravagant, weird film. It's very difficult to describe, but it's based on the book Demigods and Semidevils, and what it kind of does is, if you're familiar with that story, is there's a bunch of characters who have different storylines. It really just focuses on one of the characters, which was probably wise, because I can't imagine this movie tackling all of them. So it sticks with the Prince of Dali Kingdom, right? That was the protagonist in this film, and he's sort of dealing with the fallout of an affair his father had, that leads to a revenge and a very tragic romantic storyline. So Joel, this was your first time seeing it, and I already expressed my opinion, which was fairly lukewarm before. And I said I would reevaluate it on this viewing. But Joel, what was your reaction to this movie?
Well, I gotta tell you, I absolutely love Battle Wizard. This was exactly the kind. This is such a me movie. It really is. It's gonzo. You can never predict it. There's so much weird, crazy, entertaining stuff that happens constantly. This movie was a heavy metal circus of awesome shit happening. I loved it. Loved it! And it's very brief, which is another thing that I guess I really love in movies, because it's like, what, 70 minutes long?
It's only 70 minutes, yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's the full runtime of the movie, or if that's just what we were watching on the streaming service. I have it on DVD, and I think it was also 70 minutes on that, but I could be wrong.
I think it's just in and out. I don't know if the Shaw Brothers were like, well, we're out of money. Let's just paint over some of these cells, call that special effects. I have no idea. But, like, you know what? It felt like a 2-hour movie when I was watching it, just because how dense it was with awesome things happening. I can't overuse the term awesome with this. This is the most tubular movie I have ever seen. It's freaking rad, bro.
Now, what did you like the most about this movie?
Oh, man. What did I like the most about Battle Wizard? Well, I fell in love with it the second that it began. Because as soon as it started, there was a passionate love affair, and it set up our plot just like a traditional Wuxia movie. The lady's husband comes in, the guy fights him, and then he shoots a laser out of his finger and tears his legs off. I'm in love. Sold. Let's watch the rest of this movie. So that might not be the most impressive part of it, but that was the moment in the movie where I was like, tell me more, Battle Wizard. And
he uses Ying Finger, right? He uses the same technique that we saw in Brave Archer, right? Because that...
Yes, actually, I was going to ask you about if that was the same one that the Taoists used, because they characterize it differently, but I think it's the same technique, the Ying Finger.
I'm pretty sure it is. I don't remember 100%. I don't want to fully commit to this because it's possible I'm missing some subtlety. But I'm pretty sure that character was the former king or emperor of Dali Kingdom. And so it's their technique in that storyline. And the name is pretty much the same, I think. Again, translation and transliteration can lead to confusion, so I want to be a little bit cautious. But it's also by the same author, so I'm pretty sure it's the same thing. In fact, it might be interesting. I was thinking as we were watching this, it might be interesting if we, and I don't know how feasible this will be with both of our schedules, but to consider doing a read-through of Demigods and Semidevils. Might be an interesting concept. But
I'm still reading that fantastic novel that Duckblade sent me, the one that he wrote. So, and I'm still working on it. It's a big novel, in defense.
Yeah, I don't want to take... No, I was just thinking in the future sometime. But, or maybe watching a more thorough treatment of Demigods and Semidevils would be interesting.
Yeah, I want more. It's definitely left me wanting more.
Because you only got one character, and frankly, he's not the... I mean, like, his story is interesting, and a lot of very cool things happen, and they get most of that in there. But there's another character who's like the head of Beggar Sect that has a really cool storyline as well, and they're just.
I always love Beggar Sect when they show up.
Well, and this is like a really good version. This is like a super cool exploration of Beggar Sect, in my opinion, because you kind of get to see a lot of the politics going on in the organization, which because you always in in the Condor Hero series, you get a sense of it, but you really sort of see it more in Demigods and Semi-Devils.
What's your favorite? Because I don't even know if that's my favorite part. There's so much to appreciate in this movie. There really is. Like the guy with the hook hand. Every time he shows up, I'm happy. Because he's this weird monster guy with fake monster teeth, and he tears people apart with this hook arm. So he's wonderful. They fight a gorilla at one point. They fight a giant red python, and the guy drinks its blood to become a superhuman. There's so much to love. Guys, for real.
Yeah, I enjoyed this a lot more this time. Now, I was still I was fuzzy while I was watching it. I wasn't in the best state of mind to watch it, but I watched it, and I enjoyed it a lot more than my first viewing of it. And I think it's because I realized, there's like a lot of wuxia goodness in this movie that I just wasn't paying attention to. Like the Mu Wan-ching character played by Tanny Tien is unbelievable. I love her character. And Tanny Tien is one of my favorite actresses in these movies, and she does a really outstanding job as this character. There's also just, I think Danny Lee as the prince is great. I thought he did a really terrific job.
He's a very league man.
And there's a nice little role with Teresa Ha-Ping as well. But what really I like about it is the way that they handle the what do you call it? The Romeo and Juliet type, not Romeo and Juliet, but there's like a tragic love story element to this where Danny Lee's character Prince Tuan Yu falls in love with not fall in love, but he promises to marry Mu Wan-ching because he saw her face or something, and it turns out that they're brother and sister, and the way that it handles it, I think, is really effective, and I also I like that the initial thing we see at the start of the movie where the guy shoots off the other guy's legs and he has an affair with his wife, it leads to all of these consequences that he has to kind of they're all product of his actions, right? All the stuff that happens is a byproduct.
He seems like a total bastard in that opening scene, but I sort of wound up rooting for him at the end of the movie because of how much he and his kids had to go through by the end of it. The other guy turned into a real villain, so I think that this movie has kind of an invective against revenge, like, programmed into it, because I really didn't wind up voting for the guy who turned out to be kind of noble at the end.
It is funny how it does that, when that opening scene starts, you're a little more sympathetic to the guy who's on the receiving end of the affair, right? But and the king of Dali Kingdom, or the future king of Dali Kingdom, he looks not so great in that scene. He looks like he might be a bit of a jerk, and his wife too is not. She just kind of marches into the scene, and it's a multi-layered revenge because it's not just the guy who loses his legs. It's also his wife that ends up getting left behind because she has a baby with this prince who just wanted to sleep with her, and the baby becomes the Mu Wan-ching character, who she trains from a very early age to
the incredibly inappropriate named bone-cutting sword.
Well, yeah, that might, again, translation issues. It's a cool weapon, though. It's a bone, and you can it fires like. In the movie, they look like ray blasts from Star Wars almost, but I think they were meant to be little blades or something.
Yeah, I think that maybe that the translation should have been something like the bone that shoots blades, rather than the bone-cutting sword.
Unless the bone encasing the weapon is part of the motif because those blades cut through bone.
Yeah, maybe, because they do. I mean, like, they pin a guy to a wall at one point. That thing is dynamite. Yeah. I love that. I don't know. Or it could be, like, the bone blade that does cut. Like bone cutting in that sense. Yep. So it might be that it translates awkwardly into the way we phrase things in English. So I don't know. But I don't really care, because the second you say, I have the bone cutting blade, you whip out a bone, and I'm like, oh, okay, so it's a bone that cuts bones, and it shoots at me? That's when I'm sold on the weapon. I'm like, okay, I love this thing. It's everything I wanted in a Gonzo weapon.
Now, what did you think of the villain in this one?
Ooh, it's hard to pin down a single villain. You mean the guy with the iron legs, the yellow man, I think is what they call him, or something like that. The man in yellow robes.
Yeah, the man in yellow robes.
he's actually a surprisingly sophisticated villain. Because, like you said, you sympathize with him in the opening scene, but he becomes so consumed with revenge that he becomes monstrous, both in his form and his actions and his motivation, to the point where, like, he's killing the woman, the daughter of the woman he had previously been married to, just because it's part of his glorious revenge. So he becomes really loathsome, and I like that. I like when a movie is able to kind of make me 180 on my own feelings about something. And also, he's got a bunch of cool powers. And then when he dies, he dies in this combination of Wicked Witch of the West and that guy who melted at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like, it's this crazy psychedelic bloodbath of him just melting because of this horrible stuff that's done to him. So there's nothing to dislike about this bad guy. He's wonderful all the way through.
Well, and the and I think becoming monstrous is part of the point, because if I understand correctly, demigods and semidevils, the title refers to the 8 legions from Buddhism, the Deva, the Naga, the Yaksa, the Asura, the Garuda. That's like the primary characters in the book are meant to be reflections of those creatures from mythology. So I'm not sure in the specific case of the guy with the iron legs what if that what he was supposed to be, but you can sort of see there's a monster. It's a monstrous entity because those legs create a very bird-like effect, right? Like I could sort of. What was that?
That's it. Yeah, he really has a bird vibe to him.
Yeah, so I was wondering if maybe he was supposed to be like the Garuda or not. I don't know how all the characters line up in demigods and semidevils.
Well, he's a tortoise kind of guy. I think he's kind of like a turtle. So
I think he was meant to be that, or it was like a what was it, like a frog or something. There was some kind of yeah. But yeah, he had like a weird lobster-like claw. He's a real weird character.
Very weird. And yet, weird is not in his name. No, the guys that live in the forest, they're the Weird Brothers. That guy, he's totally normal. That's totally normal, Frank. Hi, Frank. You're totally... People all look like that all over the place. The term weird is very strange.
What did you think of the martial arts action in this movie? Did you like the fight sequences?
Yeah, I mean, they lean pretty heavily on their kung fu power, which, again, is pretty old special effects. This is like a 70s movie or early 80s or something. So like, a lot of the stuff is like themselves.
Yeah, it's a 77 film.
Yeah, so like they do lean on that stuff pretty strong, and I did want the gorilla to be a lot bigger and scarier than he was. Like, because when the man-eating gorilla shows up, it's just a guy in a gorilla costume, and it's a little stupid. If they managed to make him a little bigger and more frightening, or did a Jaws thing where you really see him or something, that would have been more effective, I think. Yeah. But the giant snake looked really convincing.
Yeah,
I was totally sold on the snake.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say the man in the ape costume didn't really succeed that well, but the giant snake, I thought, especially compared to the giant snake for Brave Archer, which looked terrible, this was a really convincing practical effects snake. I mean, the head was moving and everything, and it didn't feel like the actor was doing all the movements for it, like it did with the other snake from Brave Archer.
It felt heavy too. Like the way he acted with it seemed like it had the weight of a giant snake and a boa constrictor.
And it was well constructed. It actually looked like a real giant snake. It didn't have any rough parts or patches that were difficult on the eyes. So I thought that the snake was
it looked like a living animal, which was really cool.
Yeah.
So also at one point, a horse falls off a cliff, and I guess they actually got a horse model that looked exactly like that horse and pushed it off, because it looks convincingly. Its legs aren't moving, so it's clearly a model, but like it looks convincingly like that horse falling off a cliff. That was another good little practical effect. Well, and also,
I don't know what the state of animal protection was at the time in the place that this was made too. So it could have been the real horse. I don't know. I mean, I don't want.
I don't believe this was a real horse, but it was an effective practical effect. I might eat my words on that. If that was a real horse, I'm going to dislike it.
I will say, if you do watch these movies, one thing to be aware of is you sometimes do see real animals get hurt. That is something that crops up in these kind of films.
I get that. Remember, I'm a guy that watches Pink Flamingos without flinching, so...
Which one is that?
It's a John Waters one.
Like the was that one of the Divine movies?
Chickens, they do die on camera. They then later fed them to the cast. So,
yeah, I've not actually seen that. So,
it's worth the watch. Kinda. Much like Eraserhead, I'd say watch it once before you die. But maybe on a night you don't need to sleep well.
Okay, these days I could use every good night of rest I can get, but we'll see. Maybe I'll watch it early in the day, and it'll nullify any effect.
I don't want chicken for a while.
Now, what did you think of that weird Skittles melting effect of the villain when he died at the end?
Oh, I love that so much. That was a great effect. There were some that really hit. Like, that was one that, like, I was watching that, like, I can't believe how good this looks. This is freaking amazing.
It was like the Indiana Jones death from Raiders of the Lost Ark, but, like, 3 years or so. When did Raiders of the Lost Ark come out? Was that 81 or 80? Or 82?
81? It's a good question. I don't know. I don't have IMDb in front of me.
It was before Raiders of the Lost Ark came out. And again, this is also a movie I think is, you see a lot of a lot of the sort of things that are in stuff like Star Wars in this movie, right? And I just looked it up. Raiders of the Lost Ark was 81. But
you have the "I am your father" moment.
Yeah, you have "I am your father" and "She is your sister." You have both of those things in this movie, right? Like that's so.
You get that at the female character because it's I am your father and he is your brother. But I mean, like aside from gender reversing it, it's the same scene.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
He even demonstrates his power to use the Force because he's shooting all the candles. I mean, like, it's right there.
Yeah, no.
And
it's
no. I
was just gonna say, like when we did our read through of Return of Condor Heroes, we were commenting on this a lot. I'm very skeptical that Lucas was directly influenced by Wuxia, just because it doesn't, it wasn't exactly like he would have access to the books at that time, right? And
it's not as available.
Yeah,
it wasn't as available then as it is now. Although it was available in some limited form.
But he might have seen some of it in some of these kung fu movies, right? Like some of it might have trickled into Lucas's conscience, but I don't know. But whether it did or not, I just think that it's kind of neat that you can see so many of the same things that we love about Star Wars in the Louis Cha material in particular. So we see it here, and again, it's not done with the tone or the atmosphere of Star Wars. It's a totally different kind of movie, but it's still present, and it still has a lot of emotional weight when it is unveiled. Do you know what I mean? So, that's I think one of the things that is good about a movie like this is, as crazy as it gets, you still have these moments that can have this kind of an impact on you as a viewer, where the characters have to deal with fairly stunning revelation about their ancestry, and
actually there's a lot of very moving, surprisingly emotionally moving parts in this. One of the scenes that struck out to me was the poison sucking scene, which we saw something like that in Come Drink With Me too. Yeah. And the thing you said about it then in Come Drink With Me, where it was kind of like there was like a sexual undercurrent to it, is a huge overtone in this.
Yeah.
Like he is on top of her, pinning her down, and just planting his mouth right near the nape of her neck and sucking it out. And she is writhing in what can only be described as... Well, I'm not going to describe it.
It's obvious. It's very blatant. It's impossible not to see it.
It is in your face.
But I feel like... go ahead.
I just said it was well acted.
It was. And again, Tien is very, very good in these kind of roles. I think that in these kind of films, that act, even in Come Drink With Me, where it's done in a very innocent kind of way, I feel like that act is still intimate. Do you know what I mean? It still sort of has this sexual connotation to it. And I think that's why they were playing it up in this particular case. But because again, this is a genre where character like there's one story where I think a character tickles a woman's foot and then she tries to tell him that he has to marry her. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the level of conservatism when it comes to physical interaction between people, right? So the reason this one keeps coming up all the time in these movies is because the person is going to die, and if they don't break
that social barrier.
What was that?
So if they don't breach that social barrier, they do face a really terrible consequence.
Yeah. So it kind of does two things. It heightens the drama and tension around the threat of the poison, but also there's this sort of do we dare to break this propriety code to
and there's no going back. It really seems like if you suck poison out of somebody, that's basically a marriage proposal.
Yeah,
this is the second time we've seen it, and I think the idea is that if you get to this point where you're breaching that intimacy, you're basically saying you're married.
Yeah, or at the very least that it's like you've been intimate in some way. Like in this case, the female character Muwan Qing, she was insisting that he marry her after he had helped heal her because he had obviously seen her, and so I believe that she would have been just as insistent with the poison sucking. So, but yeah, I don't know. It's a thing that I think you see a lot in these kind of movies, so it's just worth commenting on. But what did you feel about the way that the hero acquires his powers in this one?
It's definitely unusual. It's a lot more comic book pulpy than you usually see in Wuxia. Because usually in Wuxia, the implication of the understanding is that these people have trained in these ridiculously brutal training regimes for decades before they get to this point. And in this case, this guy's a total bother. You reminded me of me a lot, because they try to legitimately train him at one point, and he totally fails. He's like, nope, I suck, sorry, I'm not going to do it. And then they foreshadow that, oh, hey, if you drink the blood of this one super powerful snake that eats antlers and ginseng, then you get to be a superhuman. That totally happens if you get a kung fu style because you drink its blood. And he's like, really? Well, I guess I could do that. And he does later on. He drinks its blood. I still feel, though, that it wasn't a cheat. Because unlike getting struck with lightning or being born on an alien planet, he doesn't have to wrestle a giant snake to the ground and then drink its blood underwater. Because he does. He wrestles it underwater so it can't escape, and then bites into it like a vampire and drinks all of its blood. That's still a pretty beast thing to do. Yeah. And granted, he gets kind of an unfair power curve, but whatever.
I think it's also interesting that he starts out as a character that has no martial arts, and he's much more of a scholar and more of like a good Buddhist. That's sort of one of his central character.
Yeah, he quotes Buddhist a lot, which is fun.
And so he's trying to be a good Buddhist, and I think that on the one hand, him acquiring the powers like that, it's a little bit of a cheat, and in certain movies I would say it's kind of cheap. But in this one, it accelerates the plot so rapidly, and it enables us to have this character who's really kind of sort of useless, and that's important early on. Like you need him to be useless for the movie to work the way it does, and then very rapidly it can just shift into a movie where he's in more of a hero role. So
and he still says there's still a learning curve to his new powers, which he has to master. So I'm down with it. Also. And I was thinking about it in game terms with like how I would do it in Tiansheng, because you learn techniques in Tiansheng in unusual ways. And I was thinking, like, I could put this right in a game where there's a monster that if you kill it, you have the option to just like learn a technique if you have the karma to pay for it. And then you can look at those previous scenes where he was getting his ass kicked constantly, and all the heroic stuff he did under fire before then, as things that were getting him karma for being a good Buddhist and being a good scholar and doing the right thing. So he actually had a bunch of XP banked up, and they just happened to get the opportunity to learn a bunch of techniques.
And I guess now we're going to be talking about the gaming aspect of it, just to transition, because you brought that up. I think that's a really cool way to look at a movie like this, where you sort of, because you're not looking at something that's a combat mechanic, you're looking at something that's like, okay, there's stuff going on in this story. What structures in the game, or what tools in the game can I use that would maybe either encourage that or would would reflect what's going on in the cosmology of the movie, because these are movies where there is a cosmology and you can sometimes see the cause and effect of things like karma. And so if a game has anything like that, this again, it's a useful thing to sort of keep in mind when you're watching it if you're planning on running a game. And that would be, I think, a prime example of, he's a Buddhist character, and he seems to be, in a way, getting rewarded for being a good Buddhist. Maybe he's been, he's accrued a lot of merit, and so that's why he's stumbling into these powerful abilities, for example. So I think it's definitely interesting. Maybe that's why the villain is, has no legs. Like maybe he had all these sins that he. What was that?
Like karmic debts and sins that he paid off.
Yeah.
And again, like that's a thing that I made sure to make a rule for, because you see that so much in this kind of movies where you have a bunch of sins you commit and then you get your comeuppance. That's in Western movies too. But like I like having that as a mechanic that you as a GM can reach into and say, okay, let's spend some of your sins and buy a consequence for you. That's neat.
But there is a key difference, because in Buddhism, sins don't go away the way they go away in, say, Christianity, right? So in a lot of Western movies, there's often an ability, a way to wipe the slate clean fairly quickly, I think. My wife's Buddhist, and so a lot, something that you'll sometimes hear or see is if somebody suffers some kind of illness or problem or difficulty, that this comes from something that the person had done either in this life or in a previous life. Do you know what I mean? It's some sort of karmic debt being repaid. And so, that's, again, if that, and again, this was a really quick movie, so how much of this is us reading into it versus how much of it was really there?
Sure.
We're not 100%
I think
sure.
that we're taking, especially with the guy losing his legs, I feel like that's a clean cause and effect.
Yeah.
You don't have to have Destiny intervening with that. But it's fun to think about, especially whenever you're making stuff like this for your own home games, thinking about it in terms of like, well, how do the characters see this? Do they see that as a comeuppance? Do they see that as something that's necessary? Yeah. Or is this just misfortune and bad luck? Like, how do they interpret it? And in that interpretation, is there a mechanic that we can use to represent it? That's always fun.
Well, and what I like about that is there's often a divide between when you're trying to emulate a genre, between emulating it and not worrying about the internal cause and effect, just emulating it, right? But some players are... I'm sorry?
I've seen that too, and really you can kind of come at it from, do I want to emulate the dramatic tropes and the beats, or do I want to emulate the reality they exist in?
Yeah, they're two different approaches. I don't think either one is worse or better, but they appeal to different sensibilities. And my sensibilities tend to reside more in the realm of emulating stuff that's internally consistent and puts you in a world that's governed by the physics of the genre, rather than worrying so much about plots and beats and things like that. If only because I'm just maybe less literarily minded. I'm not. It's not really my strong suit. So I tend to favor more genre physics emulation. And what I like about this approach is you're taking the cosmology and you're making it a real thing in the game, and that produces a lot of the genre elements, but it doesn't do it in a way where you're having resources being spent by the players that maybe their characters don't handle, or do you know what I mean? It's stuff that can all kind of be handled by the GM running the world, for example. So I find that I don't know. I quite like that. You could do it the other way too. You could put it in the player's pocket. You could give them effective.
Go. In Wandering Heroes of Ogregate, like you do have metaphysics that exist in that world. Like I remember whenever you use what was that, cathartic technique that creates like disharmony in your soul or something like that. Isn't that how that works? Yeah. You might be able to get possessed by a monster or something. Yep. That's a real fact of existence that these characters have to deal with. That we in the physical, everyday non-magical world don't have to deal with. And that metaphysics is a place that I found as a designer that you can take some of those tropes and some of those things that characters say they don't have a physical analog in our real world, and so make something that isn't necessarily like a player looking at the plot kind of mechanic, but still make something that is kind of functionally similar to that.
Yeah.
Like in the sense of acquiring karma for good deeds and that being your experience points.
Yeah.
Like, that's a literalization of the metaphysics of that world. Just like whenever you use a technique in Wandering Heroes, and you do it cathartically, you're kind of inviting that kind of demonic infestation in. Yeah. It's a real thing they get to deal with. I like that a lot.
Well, you know where that came from, actually? That came from when I first encountered the idea of fire deviation of the meridians when you're practicing internal martial arts. Oh. I misunderstood the translations on a lot of the shows that I was watching, translated that as demonic possession. And so...
It's a Western analog of a chi imbalance.
So that's how... So I very quickly realized that mistake because it was explained to me by somebody. But I decided it was a good mistake that I wanted to keep in the game because it added to the setting. It made the setting different. Do you know what I mean? It made the setting... So that's why I kept that. It's also why in the beginning of the book, if you look at the title under the Chinese language... It's all wonky. It's like a really strange... It's like, Heroes of the Wandering Plain, blah, blah, blah. So like some really weird translation of the title. And the reason was to emphasize that this was a game made through translation, where it was me as a fan of a genre, where I was receiving all of this genre stuff through translation. And so I wanted that to be clear in the game. But yeah, I think that, stuff like that is obviously great. I think also some of the powers here would be, very easy to rip right into a game, right? Like,
oh yeah, I'm so you're gonna see this stuff in some Tian Shang supplement at some point down the line. Be like, aha, I remember that conversation.
Yeah,
and some of them are just they're so great, they're so iconic. They maybe are a little bit too iconic because I'm certain at the point where they were written or created in this movie, like this is like a movie from the 70s. Nowadays, I think you'd see someone pointing their palm out and fire shooting at it and be like, oh, that's from Street Fighter, or that's from Mortal Kombat, or that's from this anime or that anime. It's like, well, okay, yeah, it is, but before that, it was the what was it, the Red Dragon palm or whatever.
Well, the one that I wanted to talk about actually is the snakes that Linger are used, because we had discussed this during the
we gotta talk about the snakes. Yeah, tell me about the snakes, Brendan.
Tell
them all.
So she has snakes that are her friends that she has all kinds of control over, and she has such control over them that she can have them burrow into people's bodies and lay baby snakes, I guess, and it just infests the person, and she has total. It's one of the most insidious things. And it's great because her character otherwise is so delightful, right? Her character is like compared to Mu Wang Qing, she's really friendly and playful, right? She's but she does this terrible thing with the snakes. And you had a really great mechanic that we were kind of discussing for how that might work. It was being applied to something else. I'm sorry?
The imbalances, yeah, and actually our conversation is going full circle here because you were just talking about how the chi imbalances got retranslated into demonic possession. Well, chi imbalances got directly translated in Legends of the Wuhan and its predecessor, Weapons of the Gods, because those are Chinese games. I don't think they were actually written by Chinese sources, but like they're from a Chinese manhua, and Legends of the Wuhan was like the interpretation of that. So the imbalances in that game are based on your internal cultivation. If you use a fire style, you imbalance yourself towards fire, and so you naturally have like a way you have to act, or you take penalties, or it could make you look demonic. In the case of this movie, like you see the characters who become monstrous. Same thing. That's the same kind of basic seed. And I took those same things and used them in this version of the game, in Jiang Shang. And so, yeah, in the case of something like poison or in infesting someone with tiny snakes that are writhing through their body, you can manifest that as an imbalance, which is you either have to either act out and deal with the physical roleplay consequences of being infested with tiny pin snakes, or you have to take a huge negative to compensate for it as your actions try to do that for you. And that's just like this little effect, this little side effect that's just dinked onto your character. So it's very modular and very easy to design for that. It's very easy to design as a GM for that, too. Like, so if on the fly, you have something crazy like, oh, I have an NPC that can control snakes, and you're like, I've got a great idea. Immediately, you can turn that into an imbalance and have the players deal with that, or, knowing the players you'll probably have, they'll find a way to use it against their enemies.
And that's the heart of what rulings over rules is identifying the tool that is available to you creatively so that you can make something that was just established in the game a reality, right? Like,
Yes.
somebody's trying to do this. Okay, what tool do I need to use to make that function? And and so it's, and the reason why it's a rulings over rules situation is rather than having to look everything up strictly by the book, sometimes it's much easier if you can just make a straight line to one of your tools, like that one, and just pull it right in for that purpose. That's the, so I thought it was a beautiful example of that when we kind of came up in conversation.
There's a reason I stole that mechanic. I think it was originally designed by Dr. Jenna Morin, who is famous for a lot of very out there, outlandish game design in the TTRPG community. But she's a genius, and that was one of the coolest things I'd ever encountered when I first saw it. So,
what's the name of her big game? You mentioned it a lot, so I just want to get that.
Sibyl's is her big one. I think she's more focusing on Chubo's Marvelous Witch Granting.
That's the one that you like. You like the Chubo's book. What's it called?
Yeah, that's what I have a hardback for.
What's the full title?
Chubo's Marvelous Wish Granting Engine. It's very peculiar. It's good though. It's very good.
We'll have to play both of those games at some point. Well,
if I can ever figure out exactly how to do that, then sure. I ran all of one session of Chubo's, and it was very different. Well, you played Amber Diceless at some point, right? I imagine you encountered that game.
Yeah, but I've never played diceless games, actually. You have to understand, I come from the era when now I'm very intrigued because I've met people who are fans of diceless games, but back in the day, getting people to play diceless games was like...
Really impossible.
Well, I mean, it sounded like we made fun. Like, diceless was kind of like saying, you had no balls. Do you know what I mean? Like, excuse my language, but that was the implication in the way that people talked about diceless games. It was like,
if they had actually read Chuck Wujcik's amazing writing in the Chronicles of Amber RPG, they would have eaten their words, because that game has some of the most savage, bloodthirsty prose I've ever read in an RPG.
I am aware of this as I've learned more from people that are into the diceless thing. It's just that at the time, I wasn't on the internet. I only was surrounded by my immediate gaming group, and diceless was. I mean, we played a lot of games, but diceless was not something that we did. So I haven't played that. But to bring it back to what you were saying, what I'm curious about is now that you mention this, why are you so into this game if you have such difficulty running it? Am I correct in? Is that a correct assessment?
You got it. That's actually the experience a lot of people have had with it. Jenna's prose is very effervescent, and it's difficult to nail down exactly what she's talking about as far as you do this, then this happens of the rules.
Okay.
And the reason it's hard is because there's a lot of assumptions that she has written into the rules, and if you've followed her work from Chubo's and the early Exalted days all the way up, those assumptions are much more clear to you. But the reality is she has a way of running that focuses on the conversation that's happening at the table, which is kind of one of the holy trinity of how role-playing games work, because you have rules, which is a very important part, and then you have the kind of shared imaginary space, which is a very important part, but you also have that kind of meta level where you're talking about the game happening outside of the game.
Yeah.
And the reason I know about that third one is because I realized while running Chubo's that's what she wanted me to be looking at and using as the core processor of the game is everyone talking about it at the table.
Okay.
That's an interesting thing to lean design on, and it's not clear from the text. Once you run it, that becomes clear. It can, but yeah, it's difficult to parse from the text that is what you're supposed to be doing, because she sort of assumes you're already doing it.
Well, I still think it might be a good idea for us to try to run it. I would at least like to, and I think Amber Diceless is something we should maybe consider.
Amber Diceless is great. And the DNA of Amber Diceless is in all of her stuff, but I think she had a different experience with it than I did. So,
I mean that's possible. So I don't know. One of these days, I would like to do that. I every so often I make an effort to go out and try a variety of different games, and I'm sort of getting into another one of these phases where I want to do that. I sort of do it in blocks, and Amber is one that I keep meaning to try, and I just never do. So
it shares space on my shelf with Jubos, so we can do them both, no problems.
Now, how easy is the? I know I'm getting a little bit off topic, but how easy is the Amber Diceless to obtain these days?
The hardback, it's kind of tough, but there are a couple of retro clones. There's Lords of Olympus, which is the same. I think it's almost the same game, but it's Greek gods. Then there's Lords of Gossamer and Shadow, I think is the other one, which is a bit more of a direct retro clone. I have the actual physical book. The sequence of events that led to me getting that is pretty unrepeatable, but actually trying to get your hands on a physical copy is kind of tough nowadays. It's unfortunate. Okay. I've heard good things about Lords of Gossamer and Shadow. I imagine it's about the same.
I'm pretty sure I have a PDF of Lords of Olympus, which I remember mainly reading for the flavor, and I didn't quite absorb the rules. But maybe I should go back and read through, especially if they're that close to Amber.
As I recall, they're very close. I remember that they share forums. I think that the designer of that game shares forums with the official Amber forums, as I recall.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's definitely true. RPG Pundit at the RPG site has.
Is he the one that did that? Jesus.
What?
I didn't know he was the one who designed that. I didn't think about it, but you're right. I think it is RPG Pundit who made that one.
No, that's an RPG Pundit game. And I think, was it Precis Media published it? If I got any of that wrong, I do apologize because I should know that. But yeah. So it's we'll have to give that a shot.
You heard it here first, folks.
So
is there anything turn into a game out of this movie? Because I think we could probably go on for several hours talking about what you could do with this movie in terms of games.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the first part of that, Joel. And I apologize. There was a slight interruption just now, so if anybody heard sounds, that's my fault. But go ahead.
Is there anything else we want to do as far as the game discussion of this movie? Because I know we can go on for a while about it.
I mean, I think well, we're coming up on the 40-minute mark, and I think we've covered most of the stuff that we need to cover, and we should quick or ahead because people don't realize this. But I was actually rather foggy when this started, and I'm wary that we might start wandering into territory where the fogginess will become more apparent. So I feel like we got a pretty solid discussion despite that. So unless there's anything you wanted to add.
The reason I said that is because I'm kind of wrapped up at that point. I'm like, well, full disclosure. Right before this, I ran a playtest of Tian for Brendan and his mates. So this is what is this, our third hour into this?
Yeah.
I'm kind of tired.
No, it'll suck the life out of you. It'll definitely suck the life out of you. So we'll end it here. And this Friday on Wuxia Weekend, we are going to be talking about Raid Redemption. And I believe the week after that is when we do Lady Snowblood. I'm not 100% sure, but I know we got Lady Snowblood coming up. And also on the Metal Workshop podcast, we're going to be doing the second part of the 20 essential metal albums, which we're still sort of working our way down the list. And I'm sure we're going to disappoint everybody because there's no way you can come up with a list of 20 albums and everybody's going to agree with you. And I'm not even sure I agree with me at this point. It's a really difficult thing to sort of limit yourself to these 20 albums that you...
That's quite a limitation, man. Because I can think of 20 albums probably in 20 seconds. Yeah, where I'm like, oh, this is totally metal. You got it. But yeah, you fill up that list quick.
Yeah, well, it gets filled up quick, and then you start asking yourself, well, okay, I like this album, but is it essential, right? Is it that's right. So...
and that's, oh god, yeah, I don't envy you the 20. That's a rough number. Yeah. If you did 100, maybe it'd be okay, but 20...
100 would have been very easy, because then you have a lot of space for error. Do you know what I mean? But like 20, It's like, oh man, does this one choice represent the entirety of death metal, right? You know, it's a difficult thing to do. So anyways, we will head out and we will talk to you later.
Project your issues onto them.